Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Craig Doescher, Cullum Number 43106. We'll hear about Craig's journey from West Point to the artillery, then to his current role today, keeping U.S. forces strong by conducting advanced training sessions. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization, most particularly the United States Military Academy War Games Committee. Now to the interview with Craig. Craig Doescher, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, look, let's get right into it. 43106 is your Cullum number, and I had our artificially intelligent astrologist look at those numbers and come back with, you have a propensity for independence, leadership, and creativity. Craig, have you considered finger painting?
I did try that in my early school years, but it was I didn't get good grades in kindergarten.
Well, that's why the Army was a good fallback for you, since the art didn't work out.
Definitely.
But you're a creative guy.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't look at myself as creative, but yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So talk a little about Newport News. You live in Newport News. Talk a little about your situation, your setup. Where are you working? What's going on with you today?
Yeah. When I got out of the Army, I moved to Northern Virginia and raised my family up there, and then moved down here closer to the beach. And I am working for a federally funded research and development company in the DoD. Feel like I'm loving life, still involved with defense and Army work, more on the technical side, but sometimes the operational side, and it's fun. So yeah.
Moving to the beach, you go down there with all sorts of sun cream, and you sit out there and with your umbrella. You do that, or you just kind of go down for a quick. How do you handle the beach, being nearer to it now?
Yeah, I mean, that's how much time do we have for this podcast? How do I handle the beach?
A couple of days for you, Dosh, because you're a special guy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the beach. I like to spend a few hours out there, get a good beverage. Do put suntan on. You know, I definitely, hereditary wise, I can show you some of my spots if you wanted to go into the medical thing.
Spots, rashes, all of those are on sides when it comes to this podcast.
But there's two beaches that are close to here, Virginia Beach. So yeah, you're familiar with this area, Paul, like Newport?
I'm not that familiar with the area, but I'll have to come out and give you a visit, and then we can go out and check out the beach situation.
Absolutely. Historic Triangle, for those that the historians that are watching, I'm sure. Jamestown, Yorktown, Williamsburg, very great tourist place. Anybody's welcome here.
Now you have sons, right? Did I get that right?
I did.
Talk a little about
he didn't know that a month ago, but just for the audience, we met a month ago, or reconnected a month ago up in DC when I was up there for work, and that was an awesome trip. So an awesome meeting. It was like we just fell right back to C4 our plebe year. And
right on, because for the kids at home, we were in the same plebe company, and that's when we met back in the famous C4 cowboy days.
Exactly. And things haven't changed a bit. I found in you, I applaud you for your travels and meeting a lot of people. People don't change. You know, when I saw Paul Kelly on this podcast, it was just like I saw him like yesterday in C4. So what was your question? I have ADHD in my old.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, you got kids. You got some. I know you told me a story about your how the famous Doescher sense of humor might have gone on to the next generation. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, no, I'm very proud kind of their sense of humor. I have two boys. One of them is a police officer up in Northern Virginia. So yeah. And the other one is in the Army. He actually went ROTC at James Madison, and he is now stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and he's in the Middle East. He's a lieutenant, soon to be promoted to captain, unless he pulls a Doescher stunt. And then, he will come back to, he's I don't know what the post is called. You might have to edit this, Paul, but it was Fort Lee, formerly Fort Lee. He's a logistician. He's been deployed twice in just his 2.5 years. He's been to Poland, and he's now in the Middle East. So really proud of both my boys turning out, but they definitely have a tough sense of humor with me. So yeah, we could go into that, but
Well,
we can.
let's talk a little bit about that, families and sense of humor. So your older brother Kurt actually went to West Point, was class of '83.
Correct. Yeah, proud to be 83.
So what was it
So
like in the Dozier household when you were growing up? Because I have to imagine there's like a multi-generational, specific Dozier kind of approach to life. So were you and Kurt, what were you guys like growing up? It had to have been crazy.
I mean, two brothers. He's my only brother. He's 3 years older, so you can picture that. He was, a senior in high school when I was a freshman. Definitely different personalities, and I can see my boys have different personalities too. My brother was very, very smart book wise, but well, he might be watching this, so I got to be careful. But he didn't have a lot of common sense, and I know his wife would attest to this. This is why this video might go viral, because his wife has a lot of followers. So I could expect this will go viral, and she'll appreciate that he didn't have a lot of common sense. One day he was mowing the lawn when they had the backpacks. He has 3 kids, 5 grandkids now. He had a backpack of his kid, and he was mowing. And remember, the laundry used to have clothesline poles, and he was mowing underneath the pole. And his wife came out, and she was waving her arms, and he waved at her. And it turned out that he was like banging his kid's head on the clothesline pole because he was mowing underneath. So there's stories like that abound in the Dozier household.
Well, we do have to give some allowance. He was from the class of '83, so we do have to give some allowance. Kurt's gone off to West Point, right?
Yep.
Now, military in the Dozier household, or was it Kurt's idea early on, and you looked over and saw what was going on? How did that kind of lay out in the Dozier household relative to getting into West Point and doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. For those that know me, definitely my classmates, I only lived 28 minutes. If you went like 70 miles an hour on the Palisades Parkway from the gate to my house, right? So I grew up close to West Point. But I'll tell you, because there was even an article in the Journal News, our local paper growing up, 2 boys, 2 sons go to West Point,
Right.
very, very unusual. And a lot of people will ask me, like, was your dad a general or something? And no, my dad was in the Korean War, did his time, served as like a private or an E3 or something. But there was no like military push. We went to, probably in my time through up to high school, I think we went to 1 or 2 Army games. There was one Army game we went to when Army was playing Pittsburgh. And for those sports fans, you might remember Dan Marino and Tony Dorsett played for Pittsburgh, and Army played them. You guys can
not a great recruiting event for future cadets to watch Dan Marino take apart the Army team, but
I think it was 73-0, and I think I'm sure Marino was out in the first quarter, like he was done. So
if they'd have told you at that point, Craig, that when you got into West Point, you had to go to every single game after watching that game, you probably would have steered clear of it, gone to Pitt. Right?
But what's funny about this, to answer your question, Paul, is when I went to those games, I literally thought those guys were in the Army, and I think a lot of our society thinks when they're watching an Army-Navy game, these are like soldiers in the Army. Right. Like, it's not really clear. I don't think they set the stage like early on, whatever Vin Scully or whoever these announcers are, they used to do that. Like, say, these are students, if you really watch closely, you do get that. But I thought these guys were Army guys, and I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, I guess that gives you background that we weren't brought up saying you are going to go to this academy. My dad was a blue collar. He worked at Ford Motor Company on the assembly line. My mom was a teacher, so we were very blue collar. And my brother kind of just applied to different schools and ended up going. And I was like, oh. And that didn't like make me want to go either. Still, I applied to. I was good enough in football in high school. I was like, I visited Bucknell. If you know Bucknell, I visited the University of Pennsylvania and even Princeton. My football coach was like, Craig, you could play for an Ivy League school. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that, but they didn't offer scholarships. It was very expensive. I applied to those schools and West Point, got accepted to West Point, got a nomination, and I decided to go.
So you get through our day, you go through all that, and now fast forward, We're going to Lake Frederick. Tell the Lake Frederick story with a little
Yeah.
family twist to it.
I mean, I tell this story to everybody that knows about Lake Frederick and my brother being there. So he was a beast squad leader or whatever, but how it was organized, I very seldom saw him. I never saw him. I had a couple firsties would say like, Doescher, you have a brother here? And I'd be like, yes, sir. And then they'd haze me more. Oh, you think you're going to have it easy. You probably knew your bugle notes. So they would ask me like the last page of the bugle notes. They were harder on me.
Right.
So literally, you'd ping still, I think at Lake Frederick from like tent to tent and all. And he was just kind of strolling. And at that time, you had to salute the firsties in the field. And, you could tell they were firsties and you had to say like, good afternoon, sir.
Right.
I had a couple guys with me and I saw it was my brother coming this way. And I said, how you doing, idiot? And like the cadets like looked at me when we got back to the tent and said, what did you do? And I said, that was my brother. So it was kind of fun.
Right.
Yeah.
You get away with that once, right? I tried that myself for people who weren't my brother. Didn't go so well, Dosh. I'm telling. So C4 Cowboys, we were in that company together. I need you to do a little mathematical calculation. How much lower would your grade point average have been if you'd have roomed with me? Because we cut up quite a bit at the academy.
We had an amazing class. And I know, I think we're going to talk a little bit about like my vivid memories are just the friendships and we just had fun. Like we had fun as plebes. We laughed like crazy. We had different personalities. I told you a couple of my roommates. I mean, like Willie Fluker and Mike Lachinsky,
The Fluke.
Mike Reed. I had an interesting group of roommates. I think I probably drove a lot of them out. Gerald Lee was another like friend of mine. And one of my memories of West Point is Gerald Lee being from Hawaii, coming here. When it snowed, it was the first time he saw snow. And that sticks with me to this day.
Right.
How excited.
He was running up and down the hallway. Couldn't believe it.
Yes. And he like put his hand out and it was like discovering fire. He was like, oh, look at this. And like if you know Gerald Lee, his voice and so it was just it was like magic.
I come from these exotic islands. What is this falling from the sky? It was like one of those moments, right?
Like 18 years old, seeing snow for the first time. It was amazing.
Gerald was so over the top, but we all actually were just marveling at Gerald's reaction.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, Gerald was Hawaii. I had Mike Reed, who was like kind of a surfer dude, California kind of guy that was my roommate. I remember he didn't want to like deliver laundry one day. And I got like mad at him and I ran out in the hall to grab him. And like at first he saw me running in the hall to say, you're going to deliver it. And then like Kendall Weidinger, remember him from
good guy.
Montana?
Yeah.
Like I got exposed to the country by being exposed to the friends that I made there. Like you could kind of realize the states where they came from, including you. And
that was an amazing thing is we were meeting people from all over the country with the different perspectives. And for a kid from Northern California, that was astonishing to me to meet so many people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, it was awesome.
What, so you then rotated to which company and kind of what was your upper class setup?
Yeah, I was in F1. So it was the divisions. Remember, we had like, it was, I even forgot like where it was, but the setup was, we weren't in those big, although our sophomore year, first time we were, and I'm terrible at what barracks they were, like Washington barracks or whatever, but it was where the cadet store was, and we lived in what did they call them? The divisions, like up and down the stairs.
Divisions, right? Where you were really like in condos because you had one
exactly.
single group,
and
right?
on like each floor there was like 4 or 5 rooms, like around each floor, and like.
So actually, I didn't live in a division, so I don't know. What was the hierarchy there? Was it like when you were a firstie, you got the lower floors, or was it better to have the upper floors? How'd that work?
That's what I'm realizing. I was like the XO. That was the highest job I had at West Point when I was a senior with the company commander, Jody Creekmore, a great guy. And we were on like the lower floor, like right outside the CQ's desk, so like we could check on the CQ and see everything was going on. So yeah, definitely the seniors were on the first floor. And I would guess that the plebes were on the fourth floor, and it kind of went
Right,
like
because
that.
they
I
had to
didn't even
go
really
up the
think about
stairs. So it's
it.
literally an energy calculation based on the number of stairs you had to climb for the whole year. And there was just a hierarchy. The plebes, of course, had to pass every upper class floor for instruction, correction, and improvement.
Exactly. And first reg was notorious to be I thought notorious to be the harder reg. Like we had a reputation. F1, we were the marching 100. I think we never won a parade, and we kind of like tried to we kind of won one or something. I forgot. It was funny. We were the marching 100.
Points of pride back in the 1980s, back before the point of pride was how many likes you got on Facebook.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
um, so you were an artilleryman.
Yes. Yeah.
What
King of
was
Mountain.
the moment you knew that you were going to go into the artillery? How did that transpire, and what was your thoughts?
Artillery kind of picked me. I did want to go combat arms. I'm too tall to be in a tank, right? I would hit my head. That was out. Didn't really infantry. When I did CTLT, like when we go visit during, you can explain that cadet troop leader training. You kind of
Yeah.
shadow a lieutenant. I went to Germany, which is awesome. That was my first assignment too.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, which is awesome because it was the time the Berlin Wall came down. So we can talk about that in a sec, hopefully.
What was your actual area of study?
Yeah, I definitely it was math related, and I remember operations research. So yeah,
And that was my major as well.
really,
So yeah.
wow, I'm surprised we weren't in more
Um,
classes.
I You never know. You know why? Because they didn't optimize it. Um, so
Yeah,
it's really interesting how many people ended up in what's essentially optimization. So it's all mathematics, and the operations research for the kids at home was a branch of Army discipline that is around. Really, it's optimization. So the same discipline that serves you good ads on your phone or on your PC is what we use to destroy helicopters in the air and find enemy. How about that? So it's technology and its different uses for you kids at home. So you were math, Orsa. You found yourself going toward artillery. What was your most vivid memory as a cadet? So if we take the plebe experience out, because as an upperclassman, what is the one thing that really landed with you?
as a cadet, I mean that is a tough question because I have so many good memories, and it's just about the fun times we did. I went to spring break 2 or 3 times, upper class, and Cheese Dog. I went to spring break with him and a
Oh
couple other
my!
guys, and that it's not even really a memory; it's more vivid fog of things we did. It was Daytona Beach. We took on Daytona Beach that year, and we ran into other like real college kids and kind of learned a lot from them. So there was not like one. I mean, Gerald Lee with Snow is like a vivid memory.
Right.
But there's just so many series. And because I lived close, senior year is vivid too, because we would have parties at my house all the time.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you ever got to Thiels, New York, the famous Thiels, New York, small town, not even on a map, but Stony Point is on the map, Battle of Stony Point for you
Yeah.
historians.
Yeah.
And it's on the Hudson. So I was close to the Hudson. And yeah, we would have, a keg. We would get a keg. There'd be a bunch of guys. Guys would just end up sleeping over my house. My mom, I think, liked some of my close friends more than she liked me because they were polite. You know how that people pull the yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I didn't
Right.
call her that.
They're like
She was like,
they're like a simulation of what we should have been, like our friends, right? Yes,
well, they
ma'am.
just kind of fake it. I think you have
It-
kids, and like when parents say, "Oh, your kid is so polite," you're like, "My kid is polite."
yeah.
Like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
all good.
the vivid memories are just all the fun times we had. Like I had a friend, Joe Possessny, who lived in Philly.
Yeah.
So he would
Joe.
Army Navy parties like that, like after the game. So there's not one like specific story that
So for
sticks
those of you
out.
at home that are tracking the 1986, the big board with all the names and kind of like the draft, like We're talking about Jim Cheese Dog Morris.
Because our close friendship, we went to his wedding. Like that's how foggy that was.
That's where we saw each other, you and I. We went to Cheese's
Yes,
wedding.
and that was foggy. I was the best man at his wedding. He came to my wedding also, and
That
like the
also was
closeness
foggy.
and how we tied, how I met Cheese. There was a guy, Steve Hendershot, my sophomore year, who was on the basketball team, and he was friends with Jim Morris at the time, and he was homesick. He was from Indiana, and he wanted to go back and he wanted to study agricultural engineering. He was a farm boy. He was your typical Hoosier, could hit a shot anywhere, but couldn't really jump.
They all can. They all can.
Yep, exactly.
My son is in Indiana now, and he can do 3-pointers all day long.
Exactly. And Jim would come to our room to meet him. Him and I hit it off. I ended up going to some basketball games, and like the rest is history. And that's how you and I tied back in, to see the Will do.
Yeah, we saw each other at the wedding.
Yes.
I remember that when we saw each other at the wedding, it was crazy. Yeah, although foggy, a little foggy.
Foggy, sadly, but it was awesome. I do want to do a call out to nicknames, right? Like Dosh,
sure, yeah.
My name, for those that don't know me, Craig Doescher. It was a high school name. And one of the reasons why I'm a little bit like I have to stick up for myself is you could figure what I was called when I was a kid, right? Dosh.
There might be a derivation.
There's a lot of people that are afraid to pronounce my last name because they don't want to say Craig Doescher, right? So that was kind of the bullies of the yard would say douche, and I'm like, It's not douche. So I had to fight for my name, but it became Dosh. And in high school, they called me that, and it got picked up.
Artillery, we graduate. Where'd you go from there? What was your first duty assignment?
Yeah. Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic. That was fun. And then on to Germany. Chose Germany. I think I chose it. I mean, at that time we had a lot of forces there. Germany's seeing the world, right? We didn't go on big vacations as a family. I mean, I went to Gettysburg, went maybe to Florida. That was the furthest, but probably trip to a vacation. So going to Germany, I was stationed in an awesome place called Bamberg, Germany. I was in an 8-inch unit. Back then, there's no more 8-inch. They were nuclear capable. So Germany was just an amazing assignment. I bought a used BMW. I lived with one of my West Point buddies, Dan Guzman, in an apartment on the economy. And we would get a rack of beer delivered every week.
Yep.
Rosdorf on Forest, I lived, for you German majors, Horse Village in the forest, so it was awesome assignment. And as I alluded to, I was there from 87 to 90. The West Pointers know that 3-year tour, and the Berlin Wall came down while I was there at the end. So whenever family,
that's amazing. What did you? Where were you when it came down, and what was the situation?
Well, it came down over a period of time, and whenever family would come visit, we would go to East Berlin. Like I would have to wear my uniform. You had very stringent rules about like, don't roll down your window when there was like the Russian guards or whatever. It was very like almost nerve wracking for like, we had some, relatives that were stressed out that they would like detain us or whatever if we didn't follow the exact instructions. But once you got into the East, obviously the dollar and the mark in the West was a lot stronger. So, and you had to spend it before you left the day of. So I had a lot of like caviar because there was a restaurant right at Checkpoint Charlie outside the ghetto in the East where they had this great restaurant, really like 5-star, and you could get caviar for like $1.50. And it was kind of like because you had to get rid of your East German marks. I have a lot of East German marks if anybody wants those. But it was just a great time. I got a piece of the wall. Because it came down over a period of time, but it was towards the end of my tour too. I think it came down in 89 and I was leaving short.
What a historic time to be there. That's really amazing.
It was great. Germany was great.
I spent some time in Germany commercially, and still to this day, the stark contrast between what was West Berlin and East Berlin, it's still amazing.
Oh, wow,
when you go over there. So. Yeah. Good. So you went back to West Point as an instructor.
I did. Yeah. From From Germany, I went back to the advanced course. I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, which is another prime place to go. They were doing base brack moves, base realignment and closure moves. So I went from one of the most desirable places in the United States, CONUS, to one of the least desirable, Fort Polk, Louisiana. So I had for my lieutenant, so I was in battery command at Fort Lewis. One of my lieutenants was like the number one guy in his class, and he chose Fort Lewis, and he was there for 6 months. And they said, we're moving to Polk. So you could imagine and I had to move my whole unit unless they had serious.
Can you imagine that?
Oh, the morale! I'm telling you. I had
think about it, and immediately being a West Pointer, the immediate calculation was all those hours I didn't have to study to make it to Polk. For the folks at home, we were basically all ranked based on our grades, and so when it came time to graduate, they would say to the top ranked person, "Where do you want to go?" And then you just go down based on your grades. And so to go from being the top ranked person and you chose Fort Lewis, and then you get shipped to Polk means literally
right. All that's pretty awful. His name was Mike Ellis. He ended up going to medical school. I know he's doing great things at Walter Reed if he's not out. I lost touch.
Right. But that certainly would be a vivid memory for him.
Yes. So from Lewis to Polk, and then I was done with my battery command. I became like an FSO. I was in 2nd ACR. We were supporting JRTC at the time, Joint Readiness Training Complex, which was like, the NTC of the light fighters. We were the Op 4 for the second ACR. And then, I was offered a slot to go teach at the systems engineering department at West Point. And they sent me to a real school. I went to University of Central Florida in Orlando. So for 18 months, I could wear shorts. We had our first child.
You made it
there. He doesn't remember. We had season passes to Disney. It was night school because a lot of the people from the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, would come to UCF to study. And they all complained. There was like 3 Army guys that were going to this, and all the guys that were working during the day were complaining, "Oh, we got to work." And we would just sit in the back and kind of laugh because we would go to the beach or Disney during the day and then go to class at night. It was a really great chance to see a real school. Dante Culpepper was the quarterback at UCF at the time. I'm not like a big funder of UCF, but there was a great school to go to. And then
good for you. And then you got a degree there to go back and teach. What was this? What did you study and what did you teach?
Yeah, I studied systems engineering. Which is, there's a lot of ops research types of classes in that master's program, and simulation also, which I do in my job to this day. Like, how do we do war games better? It's very interesting. I get a chance to see how they're doing war games now and try to improve that stuff. So I taught. The systems engineering department was not there when we were there. It's a very desirable major. It's not super complex, The electrical engineering and mechanical engineering guys, when we were there, was really a tough major. I think it's, systems engineering. It's teaching the cadets to think in a system, define the problem, develop alternatives, evaluate the alternatives, and make recommendations. So it's a really cool major to teach.
And did you used to have them make one of those things, where the levers and the ball goes? But I mean, that would be systems engineering from my perspective. No, not that.
No, we really, when I was teaching the senior design class, they were designing the next main battle tank. So do you put a bigger gun on it? Do you put more armor on it? Do you give it a bigger gas tank? So they had to kind of figure out how to do that. Not like physically design it, but make recommendations on how to design it. And now I'm still
balancing capabilities with cost and weight.
And one of the funnest things about my job now is I still keep a relationship with West Point, and we mentor. We bring an intern to my site here at Hampton. I have a miter site at Hampton. They go for 3 weeks of an internship, and we show them what the Army's struggling with now. Like they're looking at swarming UAVs, how to optimize UAVs, because all you have to do is turn on the news and you realize that UAVs are a big part of the battlefield.
People complain about West Point's, over time becoming different and all that. I think those programs where you bring in an intern like you do, you expose them to some of these development ideas. It's amazing, and we didn't have the budget or the infrastructure to do that when we were cadets, but those programs are absolutely amazing, and I find it really inspiring the things that the cadets are able to do because it just adds to their perspective.
Absolutely. It's the most rewarding job I do, and I don't really get paid for it. Just seeing these young kids, and it puts me back to there. So, yeah.
So let's talk about wargaming. So this is what you do for a living. So you conduct simulations. Obviously, you do secret squirrel stuff, and we can't talk about that.
No, I mean, if you think about war games, and we are at there's and I don't want to give you guys a class. I'm looking at the time, and I know.
Hey.
Oh, you're okay?
Our class needs the extra instruction. Like I tell you, they're all sitting out there golfing and wasting time. It's time you learn something. So listen to Doge.
There's 3 types of simulation: live, virtual, constructive. Live is your miles gear, right? Laser tag. Virtual is sitting in a tank simulator, playing like shooting, doing that kind of stuff. And constructive is the war games, right? It's guys on the battle that are moving, and then the commanders are trying to move them on their command and control systems. So it's very interesting. Like the Army has war fighters, and they kind of rehearse when they're going into theater. So it's fascinating to watch that and to listen, and and to try to help them. So it's really desirable. But
and do you design them or do you conduct them?
We are systems engineers. It's a federation. This is just very technical. But how they do these war games are if they do a joint war game, each of the services has a combat model. Army's model is war sim. The Navy's model is joint simulated forces. The Air Force has a model. We put those all together, and then we fight as a joint force because that's typically how we do it. And then we are engineering them. We're trying to integrate to make sure that when the Air Force is trying to bomb a target, the electrons make sure that if they hit it, because they should hit it, that it kills it in the simulation, if that makes sense. So they're getting
makes sense. The outcomes are plausible to help the people going through it make decisions that, I get it. Yeah,
it's really interesting. I mean, I'd love to talk.
So really, even to this day, you remain very close to the disciplines and the information around the military systems.
Absolutely. And I know you said you might ask me a question about my most rewarding, like to this day, my most rewarding project in the civilian world, besides delivering the New York Times when I was a kid, that was really rewarding.
It's a good one.
The Sunday New York Times, delivering it to like 40 people in my neighborhood. That's
pride. And Craig, you always have something to fall back on should this MITRE thing not work out.
That's very true. Yes. But my most rewarding job was helping the Navy SEALs understand the technology that they were taking into theater and going to use and develop like a playbook for. So first of all, I just I have utmost respect for the Navy SEALs. So I got a chance to interact with them for 3 months and see how they do business, and then play war games with them. Like, you could use this technology to do this. So it was just very it was very fun, very rewarding. And we get a chance, they will sometimes they send me to CENTCOM. So I've been to Camp Arifjan for a month to see their operations center and help them improve. Another fun project that you'll appreciate is I got a chance to go to Key West for 6 months. There's actually a military organization called JIATF South, Joint Interagency Task Force South. And my company kind of advises on helping them update technology. And it's just great to be in that space.
So that was your best job. That's great. So let's look at Craig Doescher at age 40, right? So young, virile guy, both knees work, a beast, frankly. A creative one as well, because your Cullum Number led you in that direction. What advice would you give yourself at age 40 just to kind of steer you toward the graceful age of 60 that we are now?
Yeah, I mean, don't try to control things that are out of your control is one, right? My son wanted to go to Virginia Tech, and I wanted him to go to Virginia Tech. Good sports program, great, pretty campus, great visit. and he applied to the engineering, and he didn't get into engineering. And I'm like, apply to another major. And he goes, Dad, I don't need to. He ended up going to George Mason University up in Fairfax, was like the president of his fraternity. He's just doing great, right? But I look back, and if I controlled that, it would have changed his whole path. But he had the maturity to say, Dad, don't worry about it. And then obviously the other one, real quick, is just a cliche of don't get so busy that you don't stay in touch with friends like you. I'm so happy that I'm back in touch with you, who is helping me get back in touch with other guys, because, and I went to my 40th high school reunion. I was, graduate 82, so 2022. So that I reconnected with some high school buddies, because it's always going to be our roots. Like, when I meet you, I realize how important you were in my upbringing, whether good or bad. But I mean, it was still, I still cherish that time. So
Wise words. Yeah. And we all have the opportunity to reconnect and move forward together. So great stuff. I really appreciate the time. Craig Doescher, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Great seeing you. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and to stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe buttons. With 954 living graduates in the class, we have a lot of stories to collect, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.